Well, g'day. We're down here at the Twizel and Tekapo canals because I'd like to show you a little bit of how to catch some of these fish. I've been really excited with the number of fish we've been catching recently, and I realised that if you know more about it, the chances of you catching more fish are going to be so much higher. So today we're going to look at catching fish here in the canals on soft baits. And so I brought along a few bits and pieces that I would normally use, and I may look a little rugged up, but it is about 1 degree at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so it's a hardy time of year. But this will apply any time of year. You've got no problem. You just get down here and enjoy the resource. Fishing the canals is about observing what's going on and fishing to those conditions. Presently it's the afternoon and reasonably overcast, and the water's moving quite fast because it's very cold right throughout New Zealand, so the power company's generating quite hard. This makes the canal flow fast, and when it's fast I need to use a heavier jig head. These jig heads which we use with our soft bait are of various sizes. My favourite is to use around about 1/12 of an ounce, and my favourite ones to use are the Nitro jig heads from Berkley. Now once I've got my jig head, what I need to do is get an appropriate bait, a soft bait. This should be nice and rubbery in its feel and look very tasty to our fish, who of course are going to love it and grab it. It's really important when rigging a soft bait to make sure that you've got your proportions right and that the hook's coming out in the right place. You don't want to have an unnatural bend, or the thing being bent up like this. It won't swim properly, therefore it won't look as good and you're not going to get as many fish. We want you to catch as many fish as you possibly can. So here's a trick. Just lay the jig alongside the soft bait and see roughly where it's going to come out. And then it's simply a matter of threading it on the hook, keeping it nice and straight when you do so. Along with a lot of jig heads that we need to have for the different water flows, it's a good idea to have a variety of colours as well. And I have quite a pack here, and it's not just because I own a tackle shop. I really believe that different colours work in different lights. And if it's during the middle of the day, I quite like having a natural colour, like this one here, which is called banana prawn. And as it gets towards dark, I prefer to have those that are lighter because they stand out better contrast. Now the gear that I select for doing my soft bait fishing is actually quite light. I've got here a rod which is essentially a soft bait rod with a nice soft tip and quite a beefy butt. I use a fixed spool reel because it's much easier to cast those very light weights with, using braid because you want as much feel as you possibly can. Remember, these fish are suckers. They just wait for the pellets and other bits and pieces coming down the canal to make them big and fat. They're not really pursuers, they're not out there chasing, so I need to have light gear that comes down very nicely onto their noses so they'll open their mouth and take my bait. Now I use the yellow braid because it's easy to see in the water, and knowing where your line is really important because you don't want to have a big loop in it. But on the end I put some clear fluorocarbon, being very good for translucence in the water, and very tough and abrasion resistance of around about 8-pound breaking strain, that's 4 kg, and I simply tie onto my jig head soft bait arrangement here, and I like to have a split ring on the end there just so there's a little bit more wiggle. Remember, you're trying to tempt the fish into taking your bait because it looks the best out there. So now we're ready to go fishing, and the canal that's in front of us is flowing from my right to left. So the important thing is to cast upstream, and depending on how fast it's moving, we'll cast further upstream if it's really fast, or less upstream if it's going quite slowly. And the key thing is not to retrieve too fast. Remember, the lure we're using is very light and it's designed to flutter down because these fish are just waiting for the next meal to come drifting down to them in the current, and we're going to give them that next meal. After casting, I'm really letting the thing sink, and I want to keep contact to my lure because I never know quite when the fish is going to grab it. So I'm going to keep one eye on the camera and one eye out here looking at my line. All I'm doing with my reel is really just keeping pace with everything. I'm not trying to bring it in very fast, rather I'm just allowing it to keep contact so that when the fish bites, I'm ready. This time, yep, we're in. Yep. And we don't know how big this is going to be, but we always treat it like it's a reasonable one. This is my third cast since we've come down here. The first two casts were bites, and this one, we're into a fish. There we go. There we go. This is just a medium-sized salmon, which is nice to see. So it gave a very good account of itself. And they taste delicious. You're only allowed to take two though.
Do you need your net? Oh, cool, well done.
No, I won't bother netting this one. We're going to let him go. You're only allowed two, so
And he's a wee one.
we'll get a much bigger one than that. That's just a good starter. Good starter to warm up with. And I suppose it's about £4 or so. Quite a nice one if you wanted to eat it, but we're looking for a bigger one.